Welcome to episode 52 of the Clive Barker podcast. So, this one we talked about Clive Barker's Books of the Damned, Hellraiser Companion graphic novels. There were 4 of them, and Jose and I were joined by Max, who Max has been so inspired by the Books of the Damned that's been kind of his inspiration for his Pyramid Gallery stuff that he does. So pretty cool. Anyway, as far as the website goes, it's time for our bandwidth to get paid for the year again, and that's a $300 bill that this year I just didn't have. So I put together a raffle. You can win an autographed first edition U.S. copy of The Great and Secret Show, autographed, of course, by Clive Barker. The raffle tickets are $10 by PayPal, and I've got it on clivebarkercast.com. I've got a link there where you can buy a ticket through PayPal, and Joey will probably be doing the drawing for me on the 8th of September. So, yeah, anyway, thought that was kind of a fun way to do it, and you know, I didn't want to just ask for money for nothing, so that's what that is. Anyway, again, this is episode 52, Clive Barker's Books of the Damned. Welcome to this is episode 52 of the Clive Barker podcast, Books of the Damned. I'm Ryan, and today is Jose and
Jose Lamarshan.
Yeah, and Max.
Yeah, hi Max.
How you guys doing?
We're doing great.
Thanks for having me on the show. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah, actually, when we first were planning the episodes, before we ever did our first one, Jose said, when we talk about Books of the Damned, Max has to be on there. And
cool.
That was 2 years ago.
Oh, very cool.
It's finally here. I mean, I knew that, you know, from the people that I know, other Hellraiser fans that I know, I mean, you're one of the people with the most knowledge about Lamarshan and all this stuff. So, inevitably, you would have to be in this episode.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks a lot for having me.
That's great. So, yeah, I would like to open this by saying that I recently got a message from the editor of Abelard Publishing. For those who don't know, Abelard Publishing is the company that is going to publish Paul Kane's book called Hellraisers. And he told me, because I had showed some interest in when the book is coming out, because it's been delayed because there were no printers, and then they were trying to get a printer, and even Paul Kane was telling me, I'm not really sure when that's coming out. Anyway, I got a message from Abelard Publishing. Robert, who is the editor, told me, hoping the book will be at the printers by the end of September. We'll keep you up to speed. Thanks for your patience. So in case you're one of the people out there who has pre-ordered this book, which was supposed to come out like last year, it's supposed to be at the printers by the end of September. I guess that means the book is on the way.
Does it have much of a web presence online at all as far as talking about the book, or is this mainly just been
I don't think so. I think even Paul Kane has been talking about other projects more than this one.
Yeah, I think this was one of those projects that ended up being a little bit on the back burner because of the problems that they were coming up with finding a printer. Yeah. But definitely, again, I can do a little plug here. I'll try to be as brief as possible. But this book is going to be called Hellraisers. It's going to be an interview book. It's going to have interviews with it's going to be because in September 2012 was supposed to be the 25th anniversary of Hellraiser. Okay. And he of course, Paul Kane has done the Hellraiser films and their legacy, the book. And he came up with a brand new collection of interviews with the cast and crew of the Hellraiser films. He had it in that book, new and exclusive interviews with Clive Barker, Doug Bradley, Ashley Lawrence, Claire Higgins, Nicholas Vince, Simon Bamford, Bob Keane, which is going to be cool because I always like to see Bob Keane being interviewed about Hellraiser because he's one of the main FX Man guys from Image Animation. Peter Atkins, Christopher Young is going to be interviewed, Tony Randell, the director of Hellbound, Barbie Wilde, Kenneth Cranham, Anthony Hickox, who directed Hellraiser 3.
Wow.
Ken Carpenter, camera head Cenobite from Hell on Earth.
Wow. He's going to finish the book up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll say the last line.
Yeah. Kevin Yeager, the director of Hellraiser Bloodline, or I guess he doesn't like to be called that, because it was an Alan Smithy movie. As well as the effects man behind Chucky and the Crypt Keeper. Of course, that's Kevin Yeager. Gary J. Tunnicliffe is also going to be interviewed, or has been.
Just about everybody, then.
Yeah. So it's going to be, a lot of exclusive behind-the-scenes pictures, which will make this an essential purchase for fans of the films and Clive Barker alike. So that's Avallard Publishing, Paul Kane, and the book is called Hellraisers.
Wow, I imagine you could probably still pre-order it, right?
I think for a while they suspended the pre-orders, but I think they might be back. Just go to publishing.avallard.com and look for it there.
Yeah.
And it's Avallard, Avallard. That's Avallard Publishing. All right.
Well, I guess this is sort of in more personal news, but this is site news for our podcast. My bill came along, again for bandwidth, and our bandwidth bill is actually pretty high because we have a pretty decent amount of people listening, which is great, but it's expensive, and it wasn't a big deal for me for the last couple of years, but this time I couldn't do it. So what I'd put together was a raffle. If you buy raffle tickets, like they're $10, and the winning, I'll probably have Joey draw the winning name. And whoever gets it will get an autographed copy, U.S. hardcover edition of The Great and Secret Show.
Nice.
Not autographed by me, autographed by Clive Barker.
Yeah. Well, it's been a busy day for me because I'm currently looking for a job, but that's not really in Clive Barker news.
Well,
but still,
it's basically it's the same kind of thing with me. I mean, I'm not looking for a job, but business has been really bad this year in real estate in Fairbanks, and I had to let my assistant go, and it's like, I don't know. It's just a lot of bad luck, and basically all the money that I've made has gone to her, and and then my wife lost her job, and so it's kind of weird to like.
Hopefully, good times are going to come back, because once these bad things happen, then the only way you can go is up.
Yeah,
true.
Yeah, exactly.
Very true.
Yeah. So
Yeah, so that's that one. Max, do you have any news for? I noticed that the Labyrinth website just got redesigned.
It's Mark Buckle has done a terrific job with the redesign, and it's something to experience.
Yeah, I was just looking at that today, and it's got this video that's like underneath all of the print, and I don't know how he did it. It seems like magic to me.
It was like the first time I've seen that used. And it's such a, he's just using YouTube with it too, but
really?
Yeah.
I don't know how that's even possible.
He's got in there somehow. Magic.
Yeah.
I think he made a deal with a certain Cenobite.
Yeah, it's like there's no borders, and the play controls are hidden, and the text of the links of the website are a layer on top of the video that takes up the whole browser window.
I like when you scroll down, there's like these different backdrop settings that you can see that are also, along with several quotes. Yeah, it's very neat.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to check it out.
Yeah,
because
the interface is amazing.
I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to do it after the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, and be sure to have the sound on because he writes all the music for his website as well.
I was wondering where that came from. And then those pictures, where did those come from? Did he take those?
Which ones?
The photos that are the video are composed of.
Yeah, he took all those photos as well. That's real. I love macro photography, and there's some really cool visuals there. Yeah,
it's kind of reminds me of the opening of the show Dexter.
I haven't seen that, but the pins reminded me of some of Barker's early work with the nails and the.
On was it the Forbidden or Salome?
The Forbidden, yes.
Yeah, Forbidden. Yeah.
Yeah, the nail board.
Yeah.
Well, and there was also some new stuff at the gallery, right?
Yeah, Pyramid Gallery is about to release Paul Kane's The Scribe Configuration, which is a box that's inspired many an author in its day. So we've taken to the past couple of conventions and showed it off to people just as kind of a preview and everything. It's got a really great response.
Wonderful.
Well, that's awesome.
You got pictures on the gallery website, and I've seen you post some stuff on Facebook. So
mainly Facebook right now. We're still putting together the actual data page for it, which will have all kinds of different photography. But I've also given out a few of the boxes to different photographers I've come to know through Facebook, and so it's great to have those type of contacts that bolster the gallery with their great skills.
Yeah, and there's also Anna Lovat, who also had made a previous work for the gallery, the Love Configuration. She also
Lost Configuration.
Lost, I'm sorry. She also made a new one, right?
Yeah, her and Mark Buckle combined their efforts and brought about information on the Ether configuration, which is it's really awesome. There's been a few pictures that we've posted online through Facebook, but it's something, and the story behind it is just as incredible as the imagery. So.
I've seen some of those pictures. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, we're just now working out the specs to make it into a music box for Pyramid Gallery.
Oh man, that's great. So, are you still going to be using the old Little Klein songs and stuff like that, or? Actually,
my music box provider got sued for using "Happy Birthday" of all songs, and he kind of chickened out and pulled like 75% of his catalog.
Oh, right.
So now the only song that's even suitable is a piece from Swan Lake. But again, we're still in the works with Christopher Young, trying to get him to transcribe the music for the gallery. And
that's beautiful.
And if we're not able to get the theme from Hellraiser, Mark Buckle from the Labyrinth is a wonderful composer himself, and we could come up with a number of eerie tunes for the boxes in the future.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that didn't stop the sequel makers from coming up with new musics for the box.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, awesome. In Clive Barker news, there really hasn't been any direct Clive Barker news, but we have some new screenings that have been announced for the Cabal Cut of Nightbreed. So one of them is Fantastic Fest in the Alamo Drafthouse in Austin, Texas. Mm-hmm. On the 21st of September, so less than a month away.
So you can eat like a juicy steak while you're listening to Pelican saying, "I want meat."
Yeah. So have you guys been to an Alamo yet?
No.
I got a pair of free tickets the last convention I went to the Alamo, and I've been dying to check it out.
Oh, as a non-American, is the Alamo Drafthouse something that exists only in Texas?
I don't think so. No, it's here locally in my city. I think they're everywhere.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And they're all called Alamo Drafthouse?
Yeah, they sure are. They,
wow. I've only heard about them in Texas.
Yeah, they serve up food and on the big screen. They have open bars.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
We have a place in Fairbanks called the Blue Loon that has a movie theater and these giant speakers that on the sides of the movie screen, and the movies they play are second run and only in stereo, but it's kind of cool anyway.
Yeah, no doubt.
We used to always like to go there before Joey was born.
So much for that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I haven't watched TV in 2 years.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah. We watch shows on we would watch shows on Netflix after he goes to bed, or now we're doing Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
But yeah,
most of my watching I do is online. I barely ever. We don't even have cable anymore.
Oh wow, yeah, neither do we. We only have cable internet, but we cut off all the TV. And I feel a little bit cut off from the world because I don't know anything about what's happening in the news. I just know what's happening around me.
Yeah, don't get me started.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I don't think you're missing much from the mainstream media.
Yeah.
Right.
But,
Yeah, well, so far from I get my news from Facebook, and it's like Miley Cyrus stuck her tongue out, and
Neil Armstrong died again.
Oh,
Yeah.
and Ben Affleck is Batman.
Yeah, Affleck, the Affleck duck.
Yeah,
And there's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna talk about the screening that there's going to be a screening in San Francisco at, I think it's called Burlingame, and it's going to be the Convolution Festival.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go there.
Yay!
I made up my mind. Hey, finally, I'm going to go to a screening. Yes, for real. I'm going to go there.
You have to cross your heart.
I know. I'm doing it right now. I'm not hoping to die, though, because I'm immortal.
Yeah, don't.
But I'm going to be at the San Francisco Convolution Festival. It's going to be awesome.
Awesome. Well,
When
good.
is that?
When is it? It's going to be in November, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The other two screenings are both in the Netherlands. One of them is in Amsterdam, and the other one is in. Oh my God. I don't know. How to pronounce.
It's called the Schemerzone, which is basically translated to the Twilight Zone Festival.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And that's in Dobbelmannweg, Nijmegen.
I'm sorry, Dutch people.
Yeah.
I know Jose's going to be a translator tonight because there's so many names in the Books of the Damned that I can't pronounce either. So
yeah, I'm terrible with French also.
Yeah.
By the way, Convolution is going to be November 1, 2, 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's going to be cool.
And Amsterdam is September 28th, so like a month from today that we're recording this. And the other one in Dobbelmannweg is on October 5th, which is Clive Barker's birthday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's also my brother's birthday. Clive Barker was born on my brother's birthday and my mom's year.
Oh, boy.
Made it easy to remember.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think that's all we have, unless you have other news.
Have we mentioned that Clive Barker is supposed to be present at one of the screenings for the Cabal Cut?
I think we did when we announced it, but that's not the San Francisco one. That's the other one, right?
Yeah, that's going to be in Los Angeles again, I think. Yeah,
that would be wonderful. It'd be great to see him again because it's been how many years now since his last appearance? Was it just last year? Or?
It was a year. It was a year ago, July, that he did the
at the Beverly Cinema.
Yeah, the new Beverly Cinema.
Yeah.
And that was his last public appearance for anything.
Right.
Didn't he go
then
to
he did
that
the Halloween party.
The Halloween party at Salon Kitty, Miss Kitty Salon or something. I don't know. Anyway, so have you guys been refreshing the Books of the Damned?
Yes.
Well, for me, it's not refreshing. This is the first time I've ever read them.
Oh, cool.
All right.
Yeah, so I had always seen them, and I didn't, and I just, I sort of drew the line that when I started collecting that I wasn't going to buy comic books because I would never be able to afford my collection if I did, so I always thought the Books of the Damned looked interesting, and I didn't really understand what they were about. I think that I had just assumed that they were separate stories from the comic books. But now having read them, I understand that they sort of, in a way, they sort of advertise for the comic books, and they flesh out the story of. It's all backstory of the world of Hellraiser.
Right.
Yes, it is. It's got a lot of. It expands a lot on the guidelines that they created for the epic 1990 comic book series, and. This is basically where they came up with the whole backstory for Lamarshan before Bloodline ever was made.
Right.
And these are also written in a way that they're almost illustrated short stories instead of... A comic book is normally driven by the art, but these are the reverse, right? They're driven by the story, and then the art is just to illustrate what's in the writing instead of vice versa.
It's all done in that Foss documental style that I like so much, like when Alan Moore uses it for like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the Black Dossier, I believe.
It's kind of like epistolary novels like Dracula.
Right.
Written in the form of letters, and you have to put the pieces together yourself. And I also like how there may be more than one story in the same book, and then they go back and forth between them. Yeah,
I count them as equally as a work of art as the first two Hellraiser movies for me. They've affected me just as equally as the movies. So, and some people may not see that, but for me, it's very much a visual, and also seeking out the books was part of the trek itself. Because back in the 90s, they were hard to find.
I only remember seeing the first two, but I didn't even know that there was a 3 and a 4 until I bought them recently.
Right.
Oh wow. Yeah, it's strange because every single one of these volumes has a little theme going through it, and the first volume, they were not like monthly or anything. They came out whenever they were done. Like the first one came out in October 91, second one came out in April 92, the third one came out in November of 92, and the fourth came in September of 93. So there were quite a while between each volume.
Yeah, so they're really sort of supplemental to the comic book series, right? I mean, is that how they were meant to be purchased?
I think so, but as being a collector myself, I haven't read the series as much as I've gone back and read these myself.
Yeah.
And, you know what I'm saying? There seems just to be a lot meat to them than...
And they tease a lot.
I understand what you mean, yeah.
So let's talk about the first one, I guess. For me, I think this was the weakest out of the four. It starts out, doesn't it? It starts out with a guy that had escaped from the Cenobites, and he wants to teach people about hell. And his opening line is, "Have you seen a movie called Hellraiser?" And when I read that, I was like, "Oh no."
It's a little self-aware. It's supposed to be like Clive Barker was actually using stuff that was real into his movies, and it's
kind of like Wes Craven's New Nightmare, where he's like, he's writing, he's writing.
I pictured the guy that
so powerful that it made Freddy come to life.
I picture this guy more as a puzzle guardian, the guy with the sandwich boards who invites the guy in for coffee in the diner that he I guess works at or whatever.
And it may be that he lied and said that he was someone that escaped, or implied that he was someone that escaped, but it turns out later, because he kind of left him with a puzzle box, didn't he? By the end.
Yeah. It is the hardest story to put together after you get all through the whole book itself. One I don't remember as well as the other books, but
it tries to do a lot in one book, because it's got this guy. He's explaining, maybe because at the time they didn't know if they were going to be doing any more, but it explains the keepers. He called the puzzle guardians keepers. It explains the female Cenobite. It explains Abigor. A Cenobite called Hunger. It explains Leviathan, and then it explains that Clive Barker was one of the people that escaped from the Cenobites, and that's how he was able to make the movie Hellraiser. Which that kind of pulled me out of the story and kind of annoyed me a little bit. But the rest of it I liked.
Well, it begins, the first page of this, apart from being the reproduction of a notebook cover, it says, "From the desk of Clive Barker," and it reads, "This book was delivered 1 year ago to the day to the Epic editorial offices. It was just before All Hallows Eve, Halloween. While I make no testament regarding its authenticity, I do offer one simple warning. From here on, proceed at your own risk." And then it's signed Clive Barker. And it's... I liked it. It kind of reminded me a little bit of, if you guys are familiar with, I'm sure you are, the short story Look-See from Nicholas Vince.
Yeah.
Because he also uses the same, trope, which is Clive Barker actually is not imagining all this stuff. He actually has met Cenobites, and he's talking about Cenobites, and he's part of this whole conspiracy thing. And because at the end of the story, Look-See, the the chatterer says, hey, if you see Clive Barker, tell him we're waiting. That's, I'm sorry for spoiling the story, but he's like, I don't know why Clive Barker put me as a little kid in the movie Hellraiser. I was not a kid at all. I'm like a comedian from the 20s, but
Or Tony
and then
Randall.
this is
yeah,
and this is kind of the same thing. It's like self-aware, a little self-aware, and like you said, it tries to explain a lot in the first number, probably because they didn't know if they were going to do many more. I mean, the number 2 came out the next year, like 6 months later. I mean, that's so I really enjoyed it, and it has some pretty cool stuff, like explaining that. They establish these little relations because all these books have a lot of references and cross-references to the Cenobites and storylines of the actual comic books.
I had always believed, and this is wrong, but I'd always believed that the Books of the Damned came out before the Hellraiser comic.
No.
That's kind of why I put them in this order for our discussions, and then I figured out as I was reading these that, oh, wait, no, they actually didn't. And in fact, some of the art was pulled directly from those comics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Some of these pinups that appear here, some of which are in my collection, others are in my brother's collection, actually.
That's right. I've seen those pictures. Those are awesome.
Yeah. But for example, they go and they reference some things. For example, they in one of the books, I'm not sure if it's the first, maybe it's the second, they mention the female Cenobite.
That's the first one.
That's the first one. And they explain that Grillard was the one who actually took in the victim and turned her into the female Cenobite, the priestess. Yeah. And he says something like, I remember you with your nice blonde hair that I turned red. Yeah. And it's interesting because Grillard is the Cenobite that appears in the very first story of the very first Hellraiser comic book, on that story called Cannons of Pain. Yeah. Which was painted by John Bolton. It's a beautiful story. I have one page from that story, where Grillard appears to the knight that came back from the Crusades. So it's beautiful. I mean, they establish these little relationships between the characters of the comic books, and I find that interesting and very imaginative.
And Grillard itself is tied into the whole religious aspect of its sphere of influence, whether through the High Priestess or through the Cannons of Pain story. So it's an interesting Cenobite.
Yes, he's challenged by a cardinal or a bishop or something, and he basically just crucifies him because he's like, I don't care. It's not. I'm not that kind of demon. So, and you're not innocent either. So you're just gonna. You can't stand in the way of hell, and he just crucifies him in that first story, The Cannons of Pain. So that's beautiful. But yeah, so this is the first book it's a little worthy. It's true. It's a little worthy. It's got pages that are like text from beginning to end, and then
some great illustrations.
Beautiful, yeah.
And particularly the Philip Lamarshan painting, and also the opposing page with the text. I think it's that color of blue they use. I forget about some of the aesthetics of the comic until I actually picked it up earlier today and was looking through it. I also wanted to mention the great cover by Simon Bisley, who back in 1991 when this came out, I was a huge Judge Dredd freak, and there was a comic that came out that year called Judge Dredd versus Batman. I'm not sure if you guys have read that one yet, but that really shows off his work a lot. So,
I have that.
It's great. But so to see him do this cover in 91 at the same time, it was just it's all very much a conjunction with the types of art I was into at the time.
Yeah, I love this cover. I think this is my favorite of the four, for sure. Cover, I mean.
Oh yeah, I agree. And Bisley also did Lobo, which one of my favorite comics as well. So there's just a few little illustrations in here that I don't think are that good. Like there's one page where they have like a Doc Kaufman's traveling circus. Right. And Pinhead is one of the freak show.
Yeah, what is that? I didn't know, because that wasn't explained anywhere in the story. It was just crammed in here, and I was like, what is that?
I know. Well, because if it was the timing, would that be right? Would there be a traveling circus at the time that Elliot Spencer was Pinhead? And does this predate Pinhead or not? I did like I caught this. It says admissions free, no refunds.
That's true. It says right there.
I like that. I thought that was kind of clever.
It says all welcome, no one refused. Admission free, no refunds.
Yeah.
And
Is that in the second one? I'm not seeing it here. Oh wait, there it is.
It's the first one. And there's also that beautiful illustration of the flames and Pinhead just looking up, holding the box.
John Bolton,
I think that's also John Bolton. That's beautiful. I have a poster with that illustration. It's just
admission free, no refunds.
Yeah. It's very poetic. It's like you said, sometimes a little hard to, because some of the pages, they're like extracts of one story, and then other pages are extracts of another story or a diary, or they're the dialogue that's being spoken between the puzzle guardian and the guy who wrote the book, who happens to be Larry, or maybe I should say Lana Wachowski, one of the Wachowski brothers, who wrote the Matrix movies.
Right.
And David had said in a comment that it was actually both of them, but Epic didn't want to give them credit. Both,
right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this would have been what Matrix was 99. I think maybe their first movie, Bound, was like in mid 90s, like 95, 6 or something like that. So this is early on, even before they got involved with taking it to film.
Yeah, and they had also, I think, done something for the actual comic books, right?
I know they did. I think Lana or Larry was credited in Nightbreed for one of the Nightbreed comics.
Oh yeah,
and also Ecto Kid, and a number of
Ecto Kid. I remember that.
I
met the actor. I met the artist, Steve Skroce. He was also the guy who made the storyboards for The Matrix.
Oh, okay, wow.
Yeah,
it makes sense then. So that multi-billion, movies all kind of was birthed through this kind of conjunction of artists for the Books of the Damned, it seems, or at least through the Epic
probably.
series.
Yeah, quite probably. So yeah, like you said, there's that beautiful illustration of Lamarshan. I'm not sure who made this illustration, though. I'm not entirely sure who is the artist for this.
At one time I knew, but now I've lost track. But I had tracked it down at one point.
Right. It's a beautiful. It's got some references also to a previous story. Like there's one that they show the Hartshorn Tower. And I think this is from one of those stories where people would go up to the tower and they would like throw gold in the air, and then they would just be taken by the Cenobites. Do you remember that story from the comic books?
Yeah, sure do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like glitter and go.
Yeah, that's it. And the other story it's referenced is the one with
the leprous center, the Hansen cardboard Hansen disease center.
Right.
Yeah, the one with the guy that didn't have any fingers, so he couldn't operate the box. So he had to have his nurse attendant or friend open the box for him. That was a really cool story right there. A really cool concept.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah. And it's got a lot of blueprints. It's got a lot of pinups in this first volume, and they explain Philippe Lamarchand, who he was and how he had to boil the material in human fat to make it to be able to work.
And it's weird how this story is different from, is it 2 or it's number 3 actually, because number 3 goes into a lot of more detail about Lamarshan, but the stuff that's covered in this book is not covered in book 3. So like it says in this book that he killed his assistant while he was sleeping with a chisel. Like he stabbed him in the head with a chisel, and then in book 3 he just doesn't want to talk about how he killed his assistant.
Right.
He doesn't do a journal entry about it, but he just goes on to say that he ended up having sex with his assistant or apprentice, and then the next entrance is right after he meets Baron, and he says, "I was just boiling the material in the combined fat of Stephen and the whore."
There's one entry where he says like the events of last night were so horrible I don't want to talk about them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But that's because it was written by different people. Because the third book is not written by Larry Wachowski. He did come back for the fourth book, which is the Revelations of Johnny John. Yeah, the Revelations of Johnny John. That was also Larry Wachowski.
Mm-hmm.
I was guessing that amongst all that stuff that or on that episode that it was him that wrote those.
Mm-hmm. But it's got a lot of cool stuff in the first volume. It's got like a little poetry, like a little song, and then it talks about the keepers, and it expounds on the keepers. Like it says, that they have a little lair that they can return and rest.
Yeah.
And usually dark and infested places hidden in sewers or under bridges, built like a rat's nest out of garbage. I can see the guy from Hellraiser 1 sleeping in one of those places.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because the guy was so grimy and he ate bugs.
The things with these books of the damned is that it's just coming from an artist's perspective to look at each entry basically is its own little piece, and it's all kind of the larger story was always lost to me. Even maybe not through like volume 3, but all the other volumes, they all seem like just a gathering of all these different art pieces, and each page kind of stood alone for me. So it wasn't always so narrative driven now, but it is now because. When I tie everything together, back looking at, I've seen the pictures a million times, so it's just a different perspective, I think, is the way I view it.
Yeah, it's kind of saying, here's some characters, here's some backstory, this is what we know about these events that happened, and you can kind of put it all together yourself.
Right.
Which is a cool way to do it. But I mean, it's in the context of, somebody who's reading all of the comic books, it's really more backstory for that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I haven't really read all the comics at this point, so.
One of the most interesting concepts that came up in these books of the damned was the fact that they created this fictional character called Isidore Klauski, which would have been a man who went to hell and he escaped, and then of course he wrote a book about it explaining everything.
Of hell, right?
Of hell, yeah.
And that's in book 2.
That's also in book 1, and that's in book... Yeah, that's also in book 1, and I'm looking at it right now. And I just think it's amazing that they came up with this concept. Of course, I mean, you come back from hell, and you know that you just escaped something absolutely, amazing. And what you want to do is you want to warn people so they won't fall for it again, or open the door to let the Cenobites out to come get you.
Of course, in the movies, even when people are told not to open the box, they do it anyway.
Well, and that kind of goes along with the idea that actually Isidore was a kind of a lure by Leviathan to write the book and to draw people to hell himself.
Yeah.
Right, kind of like a reverse psychology thing, right?
Yeah. And again, this was something I think is a creation of the Wachowskis, as far as, because in the Spring Slaughter issue of the Hellraiser series, the character Isidore Klauski appears as one of the main, opponents of Leviathan.
Yeah, so, I remember that now. I haven't seen the Spring Slaughter in a while. Yeah,
that's a great issue. That story was written by Wachowskis, and that's the one where they actually use the bones of Isidore Klauski as weapons.
Right. They could kill the Cenobites, right?
Right, because he had been infused with Leviathan. He had the basically the mark of this, primordial beast and stamped upon his bones, and so
oh my gosh,
you're able to use his bones actually against the Cenobites. Either they filed him into small weapons or even bullets and things like that. It was pretty crazy.
Wow.
I seem to remember that his bones were kind of like metal underneath or something like that.
Yeah, I never understood quite what the change was, but he was definitely a marked man. So
he also doesn't he cut one of his arms off or something?
Yeah, he has one of the priests that are a part of this group of semi harrowers. He has them cut off his leg so they can use it as for a weapon against the Cenobites.
That was in the Harrowers, right?
And it's actually it's kind of a crossover story, I think, because it has Harrow aspects, but I don't think they use the very same characters in that Spring Slaughter issue.
I read the Harrowers comics and I remember that story.
It's interesting because in the new Hellraiser comic books, I think they're trying to come back with that Harrower aspect with Kirsty.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Kirsty's friends or something.
Yeah,
I need to catch up on those comics but you probably know more than I do. Isn't there a group of people led by Elliot Spencer who want to kill Cenobites?
Well, it's led by Kirsty first, and then Elliot Spencer sort of joins them once he gets out of hell.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. With Tiffany.
Yeah. Tiffany is the new ruler, is the new leader after after
that's
Kirsten
great.
becomes the new Pinhead.
Yeah, so there's always this, of course, there has to be at one point this reactionary aspect to Hellraiser. It's not that just the Cenobites coming in, taking people, and nobody can do anything to the Cenobites. Of course, at one point, someone has to write, someone who actually can go face-to-face with the Cenobites and say, hey...
And that was Clive Barker's idea, because he came to them when they were during the comic books, and he said, you can't just keep on making stories of somebody opens the box and they get dragged to hell over and over again. He said, these are comic books. You should make it so that there's a group that can fight them.
Yeah. I like the Harrowers. I thought that there was a lot of potential there. Unfortunately, it fell unrealized, but
well, and that they would have been perfect for a movie too.
Oh yeah. And they almost had it was the crossover between the Nightbreed and Hellraiser, in the sense that it was this ragtag group of people who were really misfits and out. I don't want to say all outcasts. They were from all walks of life, but it reminded me of the Nightbreed for some reason.
Yeah,
I see what you mean.
So there's this. I have to say this. The first issue has a beautiful pinup in the middle, and it's this skinless lady who actually is Julia. And there's a page.
The Marilyn Monroe pinup edition, right? That's taken from, right?
Yeah, that's taken. It's a homage to the Playboy centerfold of Marilyn Monroe, and I own it. I own the original.
Oh, really? It's so cool, man. That's awesome.
It was painted by. Let me see if I remember. Mark Evans. His website was cloudmover.net. And he made this pinup, and he sold it on eBay once. And I ended up buying it a few years ago. And it was great, because he wrote me a letter afterwards, and he said, give my Julia a good home. And he explained how it happened, how the work was commissioned. And
is this the first? Did this first appear in the Books of the Damned, or was it somewhere else?
Yeah,
I think this is where it was at. That's the first time I ever saw it.
Yeah, I don't have the letter.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I have a letter, but I don't have it with me right now because it's not here in the U.S. I left it behind in Portugal. But I was trying to come up with something that I think I had a scan or something. But go ahead, Max. You were talking about the pinups.
I was just going to say this is one of those paintings from the first one that helps me remember how much I do like the first comic, along with the Lamarshan entry. But a lot of it is largely forgettable to me, but those two pieces alone make it, and also the Bisley cover. It's one of my good collectibles,
So this backstory for the female Cenobite, do you think that it meshes with Barbie Wilde's story?
Somewhat. I mean, it gives some connotations, though, that she's identified with the Cleopatra and her half sister. Yeah, as one point I thought was interesting, and actually made me do some historical research on that whole story about how I think Cleopatra killed her sister or something like that, or had her assassinated. It's a really interesting story, but it was kind of spawned from these little snippets from the Books of the Damned. Mm-hmm. But it's an interesting story.
Yeah, well, Barbie Wilde has her own voice and her own ideas about the character, just like Nicholas Vince had.
Oh yeah. Not saying that one of them has to be canon. I mean, what do you even define as canon?
Right. Yeah, right. But if we had to, I don't know. I think I could probably go with the one in Hellbound Hearts. I mean, this one is pretty vague. At least hers is a lot more fleshed out.
Well, and supposedly Clive Barker likes to keep the movies and the comic books and the novels all separate, so they each have their own canon.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
then Lady Abigor, and then there's Hunger.
Yeah, Hunger. And then there's a fake cover for a magazine called Domination.
Right.
Where they have like Abigor show up there. Yeah. I think that's from Dan Brereton, and that's like a pinup from 1990 that he made.
But you have to appreciate, because Marvel Comics were so crammed full of advertising, and you have to appreciate the little fake ads that they put in here that are pretty funny.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I really like the keys. Was it the keys to Lamarshan's?
Yeah, in book 2.
Oh, that's book 2. Okay.
I was just reading that when I was reading that one last night. I saw that, and it's like 16 bits, and if you have a Macintosh, you have to have HyperCard installed, and you send us a 5 1/4 floppy disk, and we'll put a demo on it.
Do you know how many people back in the day actually did that?
They had a real mailing address on there.
I know.
Wow.
That was one of the talks, like at the Hellbound Web Message Board.
Oh,
how
really?
many people actually sent that in? They cut it out and sent it in, which is just, it'd be interesting what happened, but I never heard what happened with anybody.
Yeah, well, I wonder if that address went anywhere.
Right.
Maybe it was like an editing office or something for Epic.
Right.
Well, now, thanks to Google, you can probably just punch that into Google Maps and see where it leads.
Oh, yeah, and look at a satellite view.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
actual street view.
Yeah, the world we live in is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you guys are talking about something from book 2, right?
Yeah.
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 Is there anything else on book 1 that we wanted to talk about?
I think I covered everything I had taken down here.
We could go on to book 2 anyway.
Yeah. I mean,
I love the cover of book 2.
I know.
Talk about favorite covers. I love that.
I saw it when this cover was for sale at Heritage Auctions, and I snatched the big quality picture that they put in the auction. I posted it on Facebook once. I think you snatched it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just a beautiful cover. It's even more beautiful when you see it without the lettering and the cut bits from the cover, because the cover is a special format. So the paintings actually goes on for a little more around the edges, and it's just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. I just wanted to say about the book 1 that I like the fact that they made hunger a Cenobite that appears in Africa. It's somehow seems appropriate.
Sure. There's a lot of nice little nods to all kinds of culturally relevant things throughout, especially book 2 here with talking about a military family. It reminded me a lot of the was it not Colonel Dan? What's his name from Forrest Gump?
Lieutenant Dan.
Lieutenant Dan, who his family was a family of military men, and so that kind of had that same kind of feel to me. Reading of this after all these years,
Captain Brandon T. Morse, and it was from the point of view of the letters that he wrote to his kids, Dublin and Ryan.
Yeah, it's interesting that again. This was a collaborative effort from various writers. This particular volume. It was from Malcolm Smith, Fred Vickerell, Anna Miller, Larry Wachowski, and D.G. Chichester, which was veteran from Marvel Comics. And DC Comics.
Oh wow, Malcolm Smith wrote in this one?
Yes, apparently he did.
Wow.
Malcolm Smith was the guy who played Ashbury in Nightbreed at the time, I guess.
He's actually agreed to be on our podcast. I just haven't emailed him yet.
Oh, how
really?
cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
And the topic of this second volume it's the diaries from this captain. Is it captain or?
Yeah, Captain Brandon T. Morse. That's what it said on
who was
in
in
letters.
Who was in Da Nang, and he was a Marine, and so he's got this little scrapbook, and he starts finding these artifacts and books, and
mailing them back to his kids.
Yeah.
Which I thought actually this time reading it, I kind of caught. It's like it's showing how, because basically it's all these lures to hell. Yeah. And so that's the thing, is they're not just luring the captain, they're trying to lure his sons as well, both sons. And one of the sons is more apt to follow and the other isn't, because he's just obviously not there. But so the other son ends up getting a different type of lure, which deals with his love for literature. Yeah. I enjoyed this. I probably enjoyed this better than the others as far as reading it as a story now than I did, back in the past when I first bought them.
Yeah, and book two seems like it has more of a cohesive story than book one. Which book one, the story was just more obviously only meant to lay out the world.
Yeah,
and the characters weren't really that important.
Here they use as much characterization for the characters as they do in fleshing out the story.
And it was really interesting because in the Books of the Damned, these characters that are central, you don't ever see pictures of them.
No.
I mean, you do with Lamarshan, but not with Captain Morse or his kids, or the guy that or the two guys in book one.
Well, and it kind of lends to the idea of this being an everyman story, because how many men and women have gone to war and had to face the atrocity of war, and had to send letters back home to their families, I mean, so, yeah, it's it really, even pictures of them wouldn't really serve the story as much, I don't think.
Yeah.
I like the fact that he's like a captain and he's like a military man, and the whole thing about Leviathan being a being from a dimension of order and discipline, and also Elliot Spencer was also a captain, and there's a little parallel.
And I thought that as I was reading this, I kept thinking, is this going to be Elliot Spencer? And it's like, no, wait, that would have been like 1910 or something like that, or 1930.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was like 1962, Vietnam, and you can kind of follow his obsession, because he talks more and more about, as the letters go on, he talks less and less about his surroundings and what's going on, and more about these things that he's looking for. And
right, he's obsessed.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, it's starting to get under his skin, and of course, that's the lure is caught him, and he's just getting deeper and deeper and trying to piece the pieces of the puzzle back together.
So he puts together the Book of Hell, right? And he puts together the blades of the Boros Uratu,
which are the weapons of the Harrowers, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This book has like the weirdest drawing a kid ever made for his dad as well.
Yeah.
I saw that and I was like, what?
And the kid is called Ryan. So there you go.
Yeah, and when I saw that, I was like, wait, is that really supposed to be from his kid? Or am I understanding this right? Because it's like...
Yeah. He was supposed to be this 46 or 47-year-old veteran from Vietnam, Marine from Ohio. He's got a wife, Maureen, and two twins. And then he tells them about, hey, I got this bit of a book. It's called Of Hell from this guy, Isidore Klowski, and I just got half of it. But, yeah, I'm sending it to you guys. So there's, talking about the chapter where Isidore Klowski is talking about the blades of the Boros Uratu.
Yeah.
It's talking about...
when I saw that painting, I was thinking maybe or that picture that the son sent to his father, I thought maybe they would refer to it in the letters, or like, hey, maybe you should ease down a little bit on the books that I'm sending you, because that freaked me out a little bit.
Yeah. It all feels very tongue-in-cheek a little bit, too. Yeah. It's like, not to take it too serious, but at the same time, it's I'm just looking at the picture. It's really crazy.
Yeah.
I never noticed those lament configurations with the bat wings at the top.
Yeah,
cool.
I just noticed that.
Very Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah.
Another little bit of trivia. When he sends them that piece of the of Hell book, there's an illustration there of like a guy wrapped in a... what looks like a corpse wrapped in its own shroud, surrounded by chains. That's also by Mark Evans, and that one is actually my brother's collection.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, that appeared in one of the series, right? That was like one of the
very beautifully colored.
Chapter 15 of Pain, Transcendence, and the Dark Design.
No, it's like of doors and something.
Yeah, keys, doors, and tolls.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
And then, of course, that showed up in a previous comic book, and very beautiful, very bluish, and in color and stuff. Here it's sepia tone, but it's so much more beautiful when you see the color.
How big was the actual piece?
All right, I'm not sure about inches, because I'm still not used to the whole inches system here.
We can do the conversion.
But I guess. You guys know what an A3 format is?
Kind of.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, it's like you guys got letter format. We have A4. It's kind of close to letter. And then two A4s make an A3. So imagine like two letter. It's a little bigger than that, though. It's a little bigger. I think it's made in like a stiff board, and it's actually pretty big. It's probably a foot. No, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right. It's big. I'll let you guys know about it, the size, later, because
I'm telling you, Jose, one of these days you're going to have to take your collection on tour, man. You've got a lot of great stuff.
Yeah.
You really do.
I'd love to. First, I have to bring it into the U.S. I somehow feel terrified of crossing the border into the U.S. with like 60 pieces of original comic book art, and then some guy at Border Patrol saying, "Oh, let's open up your suitcase and see what's in here."
Yeah.
And then someone asking me, "Oh, do you have like a receipt for all these things, or do you have to pay tax for this?" I don't even know.
Yeah.
Right. I know.
Hopefully,
it's totally random. It feels like what they're going to ask for or what they think is important.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm not really sure. I need to get a little information on how to properly bring that stuff in here. I don't want it to be seized or something at border.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure people are doing it every day, so I'm sure there's a process for it. But yeah, it'd be awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, they really expound on these chapters of hell. They talk about it's.
And as we're reading them, reading along with them, you're kind of imagining these twin boys are reading them.
Yeah,
exactly.
As
you're reading them, which is a little disturbing.
Yeah.
They also mention Hell's Library, and they mention Hell's Librarian, which was that character. Yeah, Balberith, the little funny-looking, goofy-looking Cenobite with the lenses are attached to its own eyes.
And Balberith had two names, right? There was another name also.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I don't remember.
Ars Longus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The librarian. Maybe that's the title, not the name.
Yeah. So they talk about Hell's Library. They talk about the box. They talk about all that stuff, and then there's all these little things that appear like collages of pictures and stuff from the actual the core when the guy's on a mission. So they keep going on for those. They keep going on quoting the letters, and he talks to them about the blades of the Borosuratu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of the pictures in here too, like Chalkus and Elastor.
Yeah.
That picture is from the Nightbreed and Hellraiser crossover comics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That
painting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then Chidna and Basilisk, I didn't recognize those. I don't know if I've ever seen them before.
Oh,
they're
the
go ahead.
Yeah, they're the two creatures that are like forever dancing, spirally dancing around each other in the center of the labyrinth, I think. Yeah, right underneath Leviathan, right, Max?
Right, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they appear in some of the later issues of the comic, I think. I can't remember which issue it was, but there was a story where there's a courtroom scene in hell, and Pinhead comes to power, and basically there's a gathering of all these Cenobites, and something had happened to them. They were killed, or they had torn each other apart.
I have a page from that story. It's beautifully painted by John Rome, and there's a moment where he knows that something is wrong, and there's a Cenobite called Flagellum, which is this really fat female Cenobite, and she's like Leviathan speaks through her mouth when she goes on a trance, and
right. Yeah, she was in. I think she was in the Nightbreed Hellraiser crossover.
Yes. I need to refresh my memory because we're not talking about
the art and the story for that particular comic series, or not for the series, but for that story, were really good. I really liked that.
Yeah, it was a shame that it was only 2 parts.
Mm-hmm. Is that the one where there's like another guy who tries to put Pinhead on trial?
Yeah.
Elastor tries to. Elastor tries to. He tries to take too much power.
Right.
He's he's like a Chenard, right? He's wanting to take over the operation, basically. If I remember right.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll be able to talk about that story further up in another episode when we have a chance to actually go back and read those stories. The reason I mention this was because the book 2 has the origin of Flagellum, and they say that she was a virgin, and she was not a virgin by choice, and they talk about how she lived on rats and sewage, and Yeah, it's really. I mean, people have to read this stuff.
Yeah, it's a bizarre comic book, really.
Yeah, it's a strange story that somehow, like her masturbatory fantasies or whatever somehow got her into hell. It's kind of like how you're gonna get hairy palms or whatever.
Or you'll go blind.
Or, you'll go blind. Yeah.
Or you'll turn into a Cenobite.
Yeah.
Yeah, that story that causes Pinhead to be put on trial is from that story arc, The Devil's Brigade.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it's called. I remember. So, yeah, they talk about that. They have another picture of Balbrith. And I don't think this is a book where they show Gryad, right? Because Gryad is an amazing Cenobite.
He's in 3.
He's not so much a Cenobite, really. He's like an historian of hell.
Yeah.
I always thought that whole concept of Gryad as writing the story, the Chronicles of Hell, in his own skin, using like a pen which is made of bone from his predecessor or from his father.
Yeah.
And then when there's no more room to tattoo, then he gets killed and skinned, and his skin gets made into another volume. And,
and then someone else has to start over.
Yeah, using his bones as a quill. So that's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And then there's Face. They also mentioned Face, the Cenobite, which is another one of my favorites, probably the favorite one. He appears in that story drawn by Bernie Wrightson, I think, in one of the first few Hellraiser books. And Face is this, he's a thespian from hell. It's really cool. They have a little bit of his story here.
I always mix that up with the Nicholas Vince story. I always started confusing the two stories after, because I read both of them about the same time. So I always confuse the Face character with the Chatterer story for some reason.
Oh, yeah.
Just because they're both in the entertainment industry.
Right, that's true, yeah.
And then there's that funny thing that you guys were talking about, the keys to Lamarshan's Lament. Yeah. Actually, I also saw when this particular piece of art went on sale at the Heritage Auction website.
Oh, really?
And I also snatched the original. I didn't snatch the original art because it was too expensive. But I did snatch
a faux CGI look to it. This art.
Yeah, I got the actual image without the letters, without the keys to Lamarshan's Lament. So yeah, I need to post that someday.
I like Black Diamond software.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually use that at the Pyramid Gallery, actually, at the bottom of my Pyramid Gallery page. It's Black Diamond Productions.
That's cool.
Park Avenue South, 387 Park Avenue South, 10th floor. 387
that sounds like
Park
Marvel
Avenue.
Comics to me,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that was a Marvel Comics old address. Yeah, that's absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I like the little computer art with like a little Leviathan and a little pink cloud around it.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
so,
it makes you think this would be like one of those point-and-click Myst kind of games.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's, I think one of the brothers starts getting more into the stuff that his dad was into, right?
Yeah, he's going through Vietnam after the war is over and trying to find his father and following the clues of all the things that his father did. And I don't think it explicitly explains where he dies or goes to hell.
No, they just leave it open, yeah.
Right. Well, the fact that he sends a picture of the librarian shows that he's already got his foot in hell, basically.
Yeah.
Yes. And then the last note, he says, Dublin, I'm writing to you as someone who knows all about your ardent pursuit of great literature, and that we have something in common. Vita brevis, our longest, Balbrith. So there's a little scrap of like the Cenobite Balbrith sent him a little note or something.
Well, that's why I kind of pieced together the fact that the brother couldn't get him, and the draw of the fathers to war didn't get him. So Balbrith has to write herself to tell him about these books and this great library.
Yeah. And you can come here and no one will bother you, and you can keep on reading without having to eat or sleep.
Oh yeah, so yeah, that's a cool way to go about it. Yeah, actually.
Yeah. But you have to wonder: what do they get out of that?
What does who get out of it?
What does Leviathan and the Cenobites? What do they get?
Souls. He wants souls.
But if he's just coming into hell just to read.
Maybe he's taking over Griot's place. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you would think there would be something a little more sinister behind that than just you can come and read as much as you want and we'll leave you alone.
And don't forget that they leave behind a big trail of crumbs for anybody else who wants to follow it.
Well, there's that.
The lures, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the third volume, which is probably one of the best volume.
Except for the cover.
Well,
I got an issue with having Pinhead basically behind Lamarshan because that's totally crashes.
It's an anachronism, and
if it should have been anybody, it should have been Baron.
Right?
Yeah,
but nobody would have known who that was, and he's all
and he's all muscly and weird looking.
Yeah.
I think the Discover is from John Riome because I see his little signature there at the corner, JR. So, he has a distinctive style.
My favorite part is the marionette. I love the marionette.
That's cool.
I know. You got that in the pyramid, right? It shows up in a bunch of places.
Yeah, just like a little, to click back to the main page, I have that little puppet there on top of a box.
Yeah.
It's like a little automaton, I guess, that he made of himself.
And there's a close-up of the marionette on the back cover.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
That too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't like the Pinhead mostly is what bothers me about this cover. But I think this is probably the worst cover of the four.
I never really realized that Pinhead would be inappropriate for this cover until you guys actually pointed it out. And then I was like, yes, obviously it had to be Baron, not Pinhead.
Well, and Pinhead's not even in this book at all.
Right. So this one, the topic of this book is that it's, for the first time ever, the Journals of Philip Lamarchand.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of backstory from the 50s, I think, about him. Like, I mean, not backstory from the 50s, but like journals and things from scholars from the 50s that are going back to look at his life.
Oh, yeah, gosh.
Oh, right.
And the craziest thing is, what is that? On the manipulation of the digits and the extension of the forearm.
Oh, yeah.
That is the scariest, craziest thing I've ever read.
Oh, you're talking about Bodecker's Treatise of Alternative Human Anatomy?
Yeah. And he's explaining how you can cut open somebody's palm and you can put jawbones from a fox in there and
you can create a predatory hand.
Yeah, the predatory hand, and you can extend the esophagus down the arm, but then it has trouble swallowing and sometimes it can get stuck. And
it's like Dr. Frankenstein on acid or something.
Yeah, it's so detailed. And
I love that because we've all seen the images of like the hand with a mouth on it, and it's popped up in other things. I mean, I've seen it over the years in like a bunch of stories and like stickers and like old metal fanzines and stuff like that. I've seen like a hand with a mouth in it. I don't even know where that comes from. I wish I knew.
And then there's the finger with the mouth on it. And you can see like the finger is kind of split open and a little wider than it should be to make this work. And it's just so creepy and I love one of the things I love about Clive Barker stuff is when science and magic sort of mix together seamlessly. And I think that does a good job of fitting into that kind of idea.
I show this comic off a lot at conventions, when I take the gallery on the road, and everybody, when I leaf through it, I'm trying to show them the graphs of the schematics of the panels. But, invariably, I'll go through and they'll see these pictures from the Bodecker's book, and I can just see their eyes kind of widen. It's like, what are you showing me here?
Yeah, and that's another thing. The panels of the lament configuration. Mm-hmm. Who came up with all of these titles of every little dot and squiggle on the? It's crazy.
I'm not sure. John Rosen is the one who wrote the bulk of it, but I'm not sure if he did every little detail. That's one thing I'd like to speak with him about because I want to know how much of the book is actually his. As far as because this was his first time that he wrote a comic. This is the first time that he was given the license to basically, okay, this issue is yours. And so
this diagram has got a whole bunch of stuff in red, and then you turn it upside down, and you got a whole other set of things that are written in black.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, crazy.
I'm trying to get John Rosen to be in the podcast or something because
cool.
I added him recently to the to Facebook, but I'm trying to. I'm trying to get him to reply. But yeah, it's so much detail and so much stuff crammed into this particular volume. It's amazing. I mean, and there's so many name dropping in this book.
Oh yeah, the historical references.
Absolutely, like Lamarshan. This is like a diary kind of thing. So he mentions like Da Vinci, and then he finds this book, Treatise of Sacred Geometry, that is given to him from Reichskunst, which might be not a name, but actually like we were talking about this earlier before the podcast. We think that Reichskunst might actually mean like line art, outline art or something like that. Because Kunst means art in German. I'm not so sure about the Reichs, but yeah.
And of course, then that's kind of how you come up with names for stories too, is you try to think of what defines a person or a character.
Yeah.
This also brings up Albertus Magnus, Agrippa
from the 13th century.
Giles
de Rais.
Yes.
Yes. John Dee and
de Moray.
Pico della Mirandola, Agrippa.
Yeah.
You mentioned that. Thomas Aquinas. So
when I first got this book, I was like in my early 20s, and this was I had been raised with a lot of kind of pretty open literature because I grew up during the New Age movement. My mom was deeply into that stuff, so I got a lot of these.
So were my parents.
Okay, cool. Well, so that was kind of so I had somewhat of a background enough to really dig into these. And this was the first time because of seeing it referenced in this aspect of this comic that I actually dug in and started doing research of my own instead of just hearing these names, dropped here and there, So it's really interesting time of my life.
Right at the beginning, he mentions Lamarshan mentions that he's an architect, but he decides to go on into the crafting of boxes, and he's trying to find the perfect material. He's talking about steel and how steel is hard to work with, but then he gets that book from the Treatise on Sacred Geometry that gives him some ideas, and he meets this guy called Geoffrey Chance, who gives him more references about Albertus Magnus's work. He first hears about the Cenobites, which is actually spelled with a Y at the beginning, and then he finds that he buys a lot of books, and then
that would be typical for 1700s English.
Sure.
Yeah. And then he buys a bunch of books from this guy, and he ends up getting more books than he bought, which some of them are the Bodecker Treatise on Alternative Human Anatomy, which seems like it was written by a Cenobite. He also meets this guy called de Moray, which I don't know if they're actually talking about a historical figure, because there was actually someone with the exact same name that they mean here. Who was an ambassador in England. He was a French diplomat and stuff.
Was his name like Anton, or it was?
He actually disappeared in a war and at a young age. I think he was only like maybe in his 20s or something like that. But so if this was actually written in 1717, like it's dated in the book. He would have been like 180 something, I think, if you do the math.
Okay.
So
this is probably not that same de Moray.
Well,
but anyway,
maybe it could be the same de Moray if he was actually working for Hell.
Maybe he didn't disappear in the war. Maybe he went somewhere else. Woo! But this guy introduced Lamarshan to the diary of Gilles de Rais. Gilles de Rais, who was this guy who ended up being put on trial for killing a lot of little children and molesting them and drinking their blood and stuff. I think that this was at a very politically very politically charged time, and he was one of the generals or something who was in the army with under Joan d'Arc.
Right.
So that's another thing that Gilles de Rais has a ritual that can summon a Cenobite. And he used a box by Albertus Magnus to do that. And, of course, Lamarshan manages to purchased that from this guy, de Moray. He purchases the ritual written by Gilles de Rais. He purchases the box, and then he gets on a boat back to Paris, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Or
New
America,
York, right?
America, New York.
Well, it goes back and forth. It's kind of hard to figure out where he's at, when he's writing what, if it took place in Paris to begin with, or is he in the colonies? It's kind of it's all over the place. So.
And then, of course, we know that he's in a boat on the way to New York, but he can't help himself, and he's just going to do the ritual while he's still in the boat.
Yeah,
in his cabin. And then he ends up meeting Baron appears, which was the same Cenobite who was reported as appearing to Gilles de Rais. And he's like, wow, if it's just the same guy, then this guy is like 300 years old. And it's like, oh. So he explains to the Cenobite, I need, something to work with to create these boxes. Basically,
Lamarshan explains about how steel, was so difficult for him.
Lamarshan basically gives the Cenobite a pitch. So, and he likes the pitch. Baron likes the pitch. And Baron is the guy who's in charge of providing the so-called flesh of Leviathan, or that secret material.
Yeah. They don't actually call it flesh of Leviathan in this book.
Right. They don't, yeah. They do mention something like that in the concepts and guidelines for the Epic comic book series, I think.
Yeah.
They do mention that.
There's a mention of it also, I think, in the first book of the Damned. There's something about the black stone that Lamarshan uses. So there's little references all over.
Of course, it's a little strange because once he actually gets the material and starts using it, and he ends up boiling it in human fat and stuff, and then he says, "Oh, it's actually pretty pliable. It's actually like lead or something that I need with a lot of strength, but it's got the same properties of steel." And I'm like, okay. Well, he's saying that it's soft, but it has the same properties of steel. It's kind of hard to imagine something like that. That's like
it's got that whole that transmutation thing of the what's it called, the stone.
Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah, the Philosopher's Stone turning lead to gold. So this idea of that being the property.
Yeah. So one thing I've been thinking about it reading these is the idea of calling him the Toy Maker. I mean, it seems that's kind of a diminutive title.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really fit for the comic books. It really only fits for the movies, for Hellraiser 4.
No, he's a full blown out engineer who an architect who designed chapels and great buildings and that were all
honestly
burned down.
I don't think they actually use the word toy maker in these books of the Damned at all, right?
No, I didn't see that.
Not that I know of.
Yeah,
no.
It just made me think. Calling him the Toy Maker in Hellraiser 4, it's a real departure from what they did in these books.
I think it's usually because of the heritage of the Hellbound Heart, where it says that he was a maker of singing birds and automatons.
Oh yeah,
right.
And then of course there was the whole Peter Atkins, Clive Barker backstory for the Bloodline film, where they actually make him make toys and automatons and little robots.
Yeah.
But here he's just a full blown psychopath who's an architect. And he decides to create these boxes, and he just starts killing people left and right.
Yeah. Well, there was one thing in this. I mean, I thought this one had one of the best stories of all of them, but there was one thing that was really confusing to me, because he visits this prostitute in this bordello, right? And he beats her and stuff, and after he comes back, he says, "Okay, so when I made my first one, I used the fat from my assistant and from the prostitute." But then later he goes back to visit the prostitute again.
Yeah,
so it's like, what, did he murdered her and then he came back to visit her again and she's mad? It's like, that doesn't make any sense.
Maybe it's not the same prostitute. Maybe
so maybe I think that might be it. Maybe when he says
that's what I got out of it.
From a prostitute,
he's got a very Jack the Ripper type thing. He's like a predecessor of Jack the Ripper in a sense, where we would normally think of Jack the Ripper as being the first serial killer. Actually, if you put yourself in the Hellraiser mythology, Lamarshan's the first, mass serial killer. So,
and if you look at that book on serial killers, they say that he killed people that society wouldn't miss.
Right.
So
Tucker's
probably
Encyclopedia.
Yeah. So probably that prostitute in the bordello would be a little more important than maybe some street person that he killed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it was Madame Turtledove's house, you know. But anyway, he, I like it. There's a part in this book that the turning point is after he meets Baron, and then from then on, he just becomes this guy who, instead of being just this guy who's looking for books and trying to figure out a way to make some complicated art, and he has a few ideas in his mind, he just becomes really, really aggressive, and he depicts that he finds himself becoming all of a sudden much more aggressive, and
he has no conscience.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
and up until the very, very end of the last panel there, that letter about how he wants to redeem himself in the eyes of God, and make up for his past, his wretched past.
And also, this has De Moray is actually assisting him in this, which is an odd turn. So, but if you read Tucker's encyclopedia, he goes on to live to be a ripe old age of 94, something like that.
Yeah.
Before he disappears in Paris again. So what happened between 1749 when he was going to redeem himself and had the assistance of De Moray, and 1811 when he disappears. So there's a huge story arc that's either missing or it's implied for us to put together.
I think that, of course, it's missing, but there's some clues in here that I think are meant to make the reader speculate a little bit on what might have happened. Mm-hmm. And I say that because of course, he became very aggressive, and then he starts killing people to boil things in their fat, and he kills the whole Jeffrey Chance family, the guy who actually got him started with the Boddicker and the books and stuff like that. But what happens here is he also mentions how he is given from de Moray another part of Gilles de Rais's diary where he teaches how to destroy Cenobites.
Right.
Yeah. And he's like, I'll just hang on to this for later in case I need it.
Yeah.
Yes. And then at one point he also has an entry in his diary that says that, well, I tried opening the box of Albertus Magnus, but nothing happened. And all of a sudden none of my boxes actually summon Cenobites or, open the door to hell anymore. So he's like, so maybe, I was naive and maybe things are going to turn on me or something. So I'll have to... think of what I'm going to do from now on. And I would like to think that he would get on a one-man mission against trying to get the Cenobites before they got him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right.
Or try to find a way to,
Well, that's what it seems, especially, the last excerpt, from his journal. It seems that that's what he was doing, was fighting them off.
But the last thing they found is he checked into a hotel, and
Hotel Darnay.
Yeah, and all that was there was a puzzle box in a pool of blood.
Yeah, in a locked room from the inside, I think.
So that's the question. The speculations. Where is Lamarshan? Did he go to the Labyrinth? Was he just killed? Is he alive? Is he?
And they said, or did he just offer someone else to the Cenobites like he had over the?
Oh, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Or did he make a box that goes somewhere else? Woo! I'm just kidding.
And what I got out of it, just reading it just this first time, but what I got out of it, or my interpretation, was that he had just finally decided that he wanted to make amends, and then that's when the Cenobites got him.
Well. Exactly, but the thing is that Tucker's encyclopedia has him making boxes till he's 94 years old.
Oh.
Right, that's a good point. So
he really disappears in 1811. So he either lost the battle and he became, or, I'm saying as far as the idea of redemption, he either lost that idea or else something else is parading around in his skin, perhaps.
Okay.
Oh,
It just all depends on how you look at it. I'm not trying to imply anything, but that's the only thing I can reasonably assert after I read everything is that, well, he either just lost it and now he serves Leviathan completely without any resistance.
What page is that on Tucker's encyclopedia?
It's actually the biography from the Tucker's encyclopedia.
Yeah, near the end.
So it's like 190 something.
Yeah, let me see.
It's near the end of the book.
Right.
Before the configurations, probably.
No, it's near the end. It's in the chapter that's the title of the paragraphs are Lamarshan's legacy, I believe. Let me see here. Yeah, Lamarshan was 94 years old when he checked into the could you pronounce it for me?
The Hotel Darnay.
Okay. He was never seen checking out. When the hotel management finally entered his room, they found it empty except for the furnishings and one of Lamarshan's own boxes, which sat on the floor amongst a great deal of blood. Lamarshan's final exit, or was it? For all we know, this could be the scene for another one of Lamarshan's offerings to the Cenobites. I'm trying to remember
which page was that.
This is page 193 of the
gotcha.
The Tucker's Encyclopedia.
At the bottom of the bottom of the first column.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Actually, it's like page 44 or 45 of the comic book.
Right. But they don't have real numbers.
I really love the fact that they go through a lot of the boxes that he made, especially in these little articles and also Lamarshan's diary. And you have some boxes. Some of the titles are The Troubled Walk, The Hollow Heart, The Child's Own Losses, The Jeremiah Enigma, The Diviner's Secret Window, Free the Broken Spirit, The Triumph of Judas, Love's Easy Tears, Filigree and Shadow.
Am I missing some?
The Hollow Heart.
I only have 4 on mine.
There's other mentions in other pages.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of these boxes, and these names, they're just so beautiful. I mean, they show a few pictures of schematics of very basic stuff of how some would be like. That just makes you. I understand why people come up with their own fan, ideas for these boxes, because it's just so alluring to try to come up with something that would be a Lamarshan creation, right?
Yeah, I think we creeped John Rosem out when I sent him a link to the Pyramid Gallery, and he's seen all these boxes that I took straight from the Books of the Damned. And now they were fully fleshed out with art and stories, and he was impressed, but at the same time, there's always been a bit of distance because he's just like, wow.
I know.
You know what I'm saying?
And it's funny because like sometimes we point this out in PMs, and it's like someone in some forum is saying, "Hey, did you guys ever see this place? It's like it's got all these boxes. So was Lamarshan real, guys?" And it's like someone is going like, "Yeah, man, that's that there's encyclopedia entries about the guy and stuff." And it's like, even you went. I remember when Max here went on a podcast with 2 other hosts, and they were talking to you about how people thought that it was real at one point.
Yeah, he had went through the gallery and he just was blown away. He was a night alone. I guess he was doing something where he was I don't know if he was a security guard or what, but he had a night, where he was just sitting on the computer basically for his job all night. He spent the whole night until morning poring over everything he found at the gallery. And
right.
I guess the next morning he was just like, didn't know what was up. And he wrote me, and I gave him my standard letter I give to anybody that writes me about the reality behind it, because I don't want to lead anybody into a place where, they're believing lies or anything like that. But I don't mind fooling around for a little bit, at the beginning. And, So anyway, I gave him the letter, and it was a huge load off his mind. But at the same time, I think he was kind of depressed that it wasn't actually real, which is kind of unsettling to me at some point. But anyway,
finding out that Lamarshan isn't real is kind of like the grown-up version of finding out that Santa isn't real.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but
Mom and Dad.
yeah. So, there's also, in this book, there was also some other Cenobites that are mentioned.
Gehenna, which was also in the Nightbreed Hellraiser crossover. He's the skeleton that's, like, nailed to the board.
Yeah, that's a weird one. That's very weird.
Yeah,
it is
he
strange.
breathes fire on things, right?
Yeah. And there's the guy who, what's his name? Tom, Peeping Tom?
Burning Tom.
Burning Tom, right?
Yeah.
That is an interesting character. It's like Leviathan turned him into like an indicator of whether or not the victims are feeling extreme pain or extreme pleasure, and his head burns a different color according to what his victims are feeling. And the Cenobites kind of use him as a guide to know, okay, so should I go further or should I,
Yeah.
And he just roams the labyrinth, peeping into like these little torture chambers and Cenobites.
He never appeared in the comic series that I know of, right? This was just this one entry. It was interesting.
Really? Huh.
I think that is exclusive to this book, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Gryet and Caesar Bill the Flayer.
Yeah, that's another weird one, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a Cenobite that actually, instead of him tearing the victims to pieces, they tear him to pieces.
Yeah.
And then he rebuilds himself from his own victims as well, or something like that.
Yeah, it's crazy, and he likes cutting himself or something.
Yeah, I think that's also exclusive to this book, right? I don't think I've seen it.
Right? Yeah, me neither.
And then of course the Baron, which has been mentioned before.
Oh
but,
yeah.
And yeah.
I've all of a sudden I'm trying to come up with. I have a doubt about Baron, which I know it's going to be unforgiving to ask this, but is Baron the same character that appears also designed by Alex Ross with that like the Kaiser spike on his head, or is that a different one?
Oh, the Kaiser spike. You're not talking about. I'm trying to think which
He's
one.
like
from the Harrowers.
He's
from
like
the
a general.
No, that's the general by Alex Ross.
Right, that's the general from the Harrowers, right?
Yeah.
From the Harrower stories. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, they modeled him after Don Rickles, actually.
Yeah, that makes sense. That always reminded me of Don Rickles. Yeah,
No, actually, all those Alex Ross drawings. There's a video on YouTube you can look up about the hidden meanings behind the characters of that particular series for the Harrowers, and
Wow.
one of them. We'll put this up on the podcast. It basically has Don Rickles. There's a number of them. I can't remember them all right offhand, but I guess he used like a handful of different celebrities as the images for characters he used.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Well, we should look into that video and we can add it to the show notes. That would be great.
So I think this was probably the deepest one, right? Maybe Books of the Damned 2 had the most interesting characters, or they had the most fleshed out story. This one was the deepest one as far as like
detail.
Yeah. As far as the historical stuff, it's like it's so Rosen. If he's the one behind the historical connections, he's did his homework, because I've gone over and over, of course, for the gallery to make sure what checks out and what's what and where what it all means actually. It's just so tight as far as the historical settings and the people and the times. It's really is it's an awesome book as far as
it's very dense.
Yeah.
And then the fourth book, and I'm sorry if I'm moving too fast, but the fourth book is just it's a different feel from all the other books. It's,
Yeah.
It's like a standalone thing.
A couple hours ago, and and it looked like. Yeah, I mean, for one thing, it didn't mix more than one thing together.
Right.
It's more of a kind of a poetry kind of thing. It's like this kind of gospel written by this guy on death row, Johnny John, who has predicted that he's in jail because he shot a priest.
Yeah.
And he was this really, really strange queer character.
One thing right off the bat about this story is that it's in reverse order from the way the other Books of the Damned were written. So those ones start out with the characters and then like books that they found, and then it shows the books. But in this one, you read the book that he wrote first, and then afterwards it explains his life story and how that book came about.
Not to mention, it shows him being electrocuted on the cover.
Yeah,
So it's literally going backwards. It's almost like Memento or something.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, good point. This, I have to say, this cover reminds me of that horror movie that starts with a guy getting electrocuted, and then
Shocker.
I think it's Shocker. Yeah. That just reminds me every time I look at this.
What bugged me about the cover after I read it was that he's supposed to have a huge tattoo of the lament configuration on his chest.
Right.
Well,
and it's not there on the cover.
Well, doesn't it appear after post-mortem, like after he's been electrocuted? That's when it appears.
Is that what it said? I thought that
I'm not sure.
When they first noticed it.
I know that's the last photo or the last illustration in the book is of the chest showing the lament configuration on his chest. But
and it was like, and they said it wasn't ink; it was burned in.
Yeah.
I have to tell you the truth. This is one of the creepiest stories for me for some reason. I've only read it maybe a half dozen times over the years, but it's very it's probably one of the grittiest stories for me for some reason.
The detail of it was a dream, I guess, that he's writing. You know, that his visitation by the angel and he's getting torn to pieces and thrown around and drowned in a river of blood and that stuff is so it's
kind of like a parallel to the Revelations of John when he's given a little book by an angel to eat, and then he starts hallucinating. And this is kind of like the same thing. It's like he meets the Cenobite, and he hallucinates all this stuff where he's eating himself. And
I see.
Yeah, so I think there's a parallel with that. That's why they call it the Revelations of Johnny John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very gospel-like.
It's written like the Book of the Revelation, as far as that first section with the sepia tone illustrations.
Again, this is a book written by Larry Wachowski.
Yeah. And
it's got a bunch of great pinup art in here. I mean, you know, I'm especially fond of the one with the fake record cover from Praxis.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, with the girl with the tears that look like crosses.
Yeah, right. That's a painting by Tristan. He's like a famous fantasy art painter, and I think that's just amazing. The way that it looks like there's a pair of hands that look like they're playing a guitar, but they're playing like a bunch of bones.
Yeah,
and that's just amazing. That would make a great album cover, actually.
So that painting, Zitjaculation.
Yeah,
he was supposed to have done that one in high school. And so I saw that, and it's like, wait a minute. He was that's like a comic book cover art.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that. I'm not sure. I think that's from either
But it's kind of like Ryan painting that picture with from hell.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all very you got to use your imagination a little bit, but at the same time, it's I understand because I like to see when these things false documents are done. There's a certain level where you want it done perfectly. You know what I'm saying? So you can judge it on two scales if you want it to be more like an H.P. Lovecraft thing or accept it as a graphic novel put together,
Yeah, that's true.
Involving all these different artists. What's this painting with the babies? I just flipped to it. It's pretty disturbing. I forgot about this one. It's near the end of the book.
Yes.
Oh, that was a fan of his or somebody. They painted this based on his Gospels. Julia Eakins, right? With the eggs and the guy in the pyramid?
No, this one's got a bunch of babies, and it looks like maybe even a birth is happening. I don't know what I'm seeing. It's
kind of like reminiscent of Geiger paintings, right? Except a little more gruesome and like a collage style. You got a lot of heads and the fetuses' heads that look like they were drawn from
look at that guy.
Or something.
Who's the guy grinning down there? That guy looks like the guy from D. Antwoord or something. Look at that guy.
Oh, I'm trying to see. Well, what do you mean the grinning? I'm trying to.
Oh, there's a guy.
Oh on the right.
Towards the right near the bottom
with the black outline around.
Oh, with a black lace or something around his eyes. Yeah. Oh, okay, I see it now. Yeah, and I see also a baby monster, like Siamese twins united by the abdomen. And there's a bunch of weird stuff in here. There's it's like someone got an encyclopedia of little of teratology like monsters, and they just collage the whole thing together. Yeah. It's very, very disturbing. Yes.
Yeah.
And so basically, the Johnny John predicted that he was going to die on the after 1,000 days on death row, and then he starts his diary or revelations.
And he predicted his last meal, and that he would try to kiss one of the guards, and they would push him away. And
and then here's the ending that says that the thing about the tattoo that we were talking about that you mentioned that he doesn't have it in the cover. It says here, however, the most significant piece of evidence came during his execution in the form of a bizarre burn mark on his chest, a box with precise geometric lines inside, the exact same pattern on page 19 of his book. No ink was found beneath his skin, and the burn was generally left unexplained.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that it appeared after his execution.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's probably more plausible than what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That would make a heck of a movie, though. I mean, after reading these books, now people can understand why, me, in particular, it's like all these movies have come out after 2. It's just like they can't even measure up to some of the storytelling, especially in these books of the damned. So
it's a shame. And you kind of don't want them to make any more Hellraiser movies now.
No, not at all.
Now there's been so many of them, and they've kind of ruined it that. Even if somehow they were able to make a good Hellraiser movie, would it ever get to the theater? Would it ever have a decent budget again?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. I mean, maybe a remake would.
Well, personally, I can only speak for myself as a fan. I kind of lost faith in the Hellraiser movies.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. I think that the way that Hollywood works, the way the system making movies works, the way that nowadays people just want to play it safe for the money, and of course, if they're going to make a Hellraiser, they're not going to make an art house film in black and white or something. They're not going to do, they want to do something that's going to be a blockbuster, that's going to create a franchise. And the very definition of a blockbuster doesn't allow for, things to be taken to the extremes that this story would demand it. And
what's strange is that what the Hellraiser movies have become has been sort of determined to be the safe route. But why is it safe? I mean, these movies are bad. I know.
Right.
It's just I don't know. I'm just
like you said. I think Hollywood is afraid to tell these type of stories. These stories, comic book stories in particular, are very bold as far as what they're saying and addressing.
Yeah.
And Hollywood doesn't have the balls to tell stories like that. They just never have.
Yeah.
There are some, I think people have got in there and have worked the system a bit and been able to release some, some really great art. But overall, even like Orson Welles, who says that, what he thinks about Hollywood is he wished he never got involved with to begin with, but yet he was able to express himself through the system that way. But
but then at the end of his career, I mean, he was completely out of the system, and he just had no qualms about calling it what it was. But the thing about this is that they don't like the powers that be. They just don't like. They can make a movie like Saw, where there's gore and there's violence and there's like absolutely gratuitous torture in those films.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you try to make something that, it's like they can glorify torture as something bad, but as soon as you try mixing some different concepts and ideas into it, if you try making if you put gore in, but you also mix it in with some sex, or you make it attractive somehow, then all of a sudden everybody loses their minds. They're like, "Oh no, you're trying to no, that's wrong. You can't do that. That's sick. That's depraved. But you can have like movies like Saw
or Hostel,
have someone. Oh, you're going to have to stick your arm into this saw and cut it, and the blood will run down this tube and will open the door on the other side. But if you have someone like kissing another person covered in blood, then they would just be like, "Oh no, that's absolutely not possible.
Yeah.
You can't do it because the MPAA would never allow it, and it's sick." And it makes you wonder. I mean, why are they so afraid? I don't know.
Why is more realistic like Hostel? Why is that better? To me, fantasy is way better. As far as this kind of thing than brutal reality of something like, I guess that could happen, and that's horrible.
Think about with these books of the damned. You think about the stories, particularly like number 2 about the war and everything. Hollywood's not going to make that story because that goes counterintuitive to the things they promote. They're never going to produce a movie like that or even a TV show like that. It's the same thing with the number of these books. Like I said, Volume 3 was a part of landscaping my life because it touched on so many things of interest that I had already been influenced by. So
what it is if they can get a filmmaker that has made so much money for them that they'll trust them to do whatever they want. And Clive Barker's not that person. I mean, he was when he made Hellraiser, but then when he made Nightbreed and they screwed around with it, then he lost that.
The only movie that I've seen that, and the only situation where violence and blood can be mixed in with like a certain kind of like beauty and is for example when you have movies like The Passion of the Christ or something like that, but that involves religion, so that is different. That's a complete game changer right there. You can have like Jesus Christ completely covered in blood, and you can make it in slow motion and put some classical music on it and make it beautiful, but it's because of the sacrifice. But if you, like I said, like you can only do it if you're using like either a religious motif or if you're using it over the top gratuitous.
Right.
That's the only two instances where you can actually depict cinematic violence in a way that's accepted by society. Once you start mixing other things in there with violence and or not just violence, but what am I trying to say? I'm trying to come up with a word that would depict, what Hellraiser is about, and
kind of an artistic depiction, I guess, of violence instead of glorifying the shock
for me,
value.
The danger of Hellraiser wasn't really the violence or the sexuality of between Julie and Frank. It was the idea that this little girl could go into hell and come out alive by her own ingenuity. So we're talking about a female person being able to take on hell and win. Yeah. And so that to me is why, although they did put out that story, and that's why I think the real attraction of the story really is. It's not that the Cenobites will always win, because they don't always win. Yeah, it's the idea that there's a female force that can actually do something and be very competent in what she does because she's smart and on the ball,
Yeah, because the Hellraiser movies were subversive in the way that the last man standing is a girl, and and the last man standing is
or two girls in the second one.
Yeah, right. So it's first of all, it empowers this is something that of course Clive Barker always did this. It's very empowering to females, and It flips the board. It changes the rules of what we're used to. It's not going to be like. Well,
the male protagonists don't take over. In fact, they're kind of useless and a little bit funny. Like Steve getting punched in the face by the engineer.
Yeah. But even the Cenobites, they're not entirely evil.
No.
So they're monsters, but they're not monstrous. And they're monsters in the aesthetic sense, but in fact, in the second movie, like that's when Pinhead started becoming more like an anti-hero when he faces like Shenard, and he he
gained his humanity back.
Yeah. So whenever you start making the monster become the good guy, then that's when some people start raising their eyebrows and saying, I'm not sure I like this. This is making me...
You see what the Cenobites did to Frank at the end of Hellraiser, and it's like, yes, this is, Frank's finally getting what he deserves.
Right. So Frank's the monster. And
the regular person is the monster, and the monsters are sort of a force of justice, I guess.
Yeah, almost like karmic or something,
Yeah.
But in the end of this fourth book, The Revelations of Johnny John, after he's executed, he tells the guard, before, of course, but he tells the guard that he has a book in his cell, and then they go look in the cell, and there's nothing there. After the execution, the book appears. And somehow the book goes out, and there's this cult created around the book.
Yeah.
They call it the Cult of the Flesh. It's like this guy. So this does beg the question: what was so special about Johnny John that these things happen to him, and he leaves this book behind? Is it just another way of Leviathan to create another big lure to get more people to look into things that will lead them to Leviathan.
Well, he always seemed to be a little bit touched by the sort of a Cenobite sensibility, right? I mean,
right.
Through his after you've read his story, then you read about through his whole career, the weird stuff that he did and what he was into, and how he like in one of the shows he cut off a big chunk of his arm and ate it on stage.
It's almost like Johnny John was like an avatar for Leviathan or something.
Mm-hmm.
In the
he
sense
had an audience. If he has an audience, that's how Leviathan reaches the audience is through his his little puppets or whatever.
Yeah, and this is my speculation, but maybe it's almost like he's maybe he was like a child of Leviathan or something. Like.
Well, he was definitely somebody that maybe Leviathan was impressed with and wanted his work to continue even after he died.
Sure.
And put together something for him in his last moments, before he died.
Because he never solves a box or anything in this. Yeah. It's more like his own actions and the way his vision of the world kind of like allow him to. Yeah.
He sort of in the moment of his death, he sort of slipped into another time or another world and was able to write that book.
Well, he's a prophet, he's a prophet of Leviathan. Yeah. That's the whole idea of the revelations of Johnny John is the fact that he's someone who's actually the mouth of God, to the masses. He's the one who's dictating what is going to happen, and setting it down in stone for people to read.
And he was a little bit touched, I think, with that for his whole life before that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's why I brought up this idea that I thought that he might have been like almost what's the word I'm trying to come up with? Almost like he was made or brought into being by Leviathan.
Sure. Right. I mean, I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like an alternate Messiah, or in a way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. So, the prophet thing is just perfect. That's just what I was trying to say. Thank you, Max.
What was his band called? Coccyx?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the bone in the bottom of your spine there.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's very poetic. It's written by Larry Wachowski, who had his own, transitions and his own fight to turn himself into a male to female transsexual. So it's a book about transformation, about changing the flesh, about that. I'm not surprised that it was Larry Wachowski that wrote it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it was like several years because she didn't become Lana Wachowski until I think when Speed Racer came out. I think that's when it was. Because they denied it for a long time.
Right.
And, so that when Speed Racer was like 2000 something or other. So this would have been like
2009 or something, or 10 or something.
Wow, yeah. So
this is very interesting.
All the Matrix movies were done.
Yeah. If you guys look into the life of Lana Wachowski, very interesting character. Very interesting character. Just the relationships that she had, and the dominatrixes, porn stars, Buck Angel, and it's just so strange the life that Lana Wachowski lived.
Is this a book or a biography, or what is this?
I read a huge article online. I think it was from some kind of magazine, or I'm not sure, New Yorker or something like that. It was just about Larry, Lana, and the transition period, and the whole journey that she had to undertake to transform herself into another person. And it's just very, very strange, very bizarre circle of people that apparently she dealt with. From very troubling relationship with a dominatrix, and then another relationship with another porn star, and all that. Very, very strange. Google Larry Wachowski or Lana Wachowski, and you will find a bunch of articles out there that explain what that person went through.
What was their most recent movie? what was that called? It didn't do too well, I think.
Oh,
in the box
Cloud Atlas.
Yeah, I wanted to see that, but
yeah, I haven't seen it yet either. But I hear that they've changed quite a bit of what was written or something like that. I'll have to look it back up. But officially, they list Speed Racer as their last movie. But
oh, really?
Yeah.
Because I heard an interview with those two, on the Nerdist podcast.
Oh, okay.
When they were promoting Cloud Atlas, when it was just about to come out. But I haven't seen the movie.
Is that the book with the movie with Tom Hanks and Halle Berry?
Yeah.
Yes. I haven't seen that one yet, actually.
So maybe we'll all end up watching that this weekend or something.
I mean, it seems like it would be a good movie, but maybe it wasn't like the kind of blockbuster movie that people were looking for.
It's certainly interesting as far as the idea of reincarnation or whatever, showing these characters all interacting with each other through these different lives. I mean, I know that's been done before, but it looked really had that kind of the CGI thing going ever since. What's the movie?
It seems like it had kind of an epic scale to it.
Are you talking about Benjamin Button?
No, I was speaking about the one about the alien world where the guy. I never saw it, the big Cameron movie.
Avatar.
Avatar. Yeah, it seemed like kind of like an Avatar thing, but I never seen it, so I don't know what I'm talking about.
So I would say that these 4 books, these companions to the Hellraiser comic books, they're very interesting. If you're into the whole Hellraiser epic Marvel run, you should. If you haven't read these, they're very interesting. I'm not exactly sure how rare they are. I think you can still find them on eBay.
Comic books have become a lot less rare these days. I mean, people are just trying to get rid of them. They don't seem to have held their value that much.
I don't think that the Books of the Damned have ever been collected into a trade paperback or something, right?
I bought all of them just like a year or two ago, just for the purpose of this podcast, and I don't think I paid that much for them.
Yeah, I think I buy them every now and then for different artists I work with, and I think I get them generally for under $10 a piece.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
But they're definitely worth it.
Oh yeah, I think so.
Yeah, especially the 3rd volume, and that's just the Bible for people who like Hellraiser Bloodline and Lamarshan, the whole myth about the box and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And you think about how much work went into the writing is amazing. I mean, the artwork is probably only 2/3 original and 1/3 is comic artwork from the Hellraiser series. But the stories, the amount of detail and time that was put into the stories is great.
Yeah, just the continuity alone. I mean, there may be some small little mix-ups here and there, but generally the continuity is really good, specifically historically with the characters they deal with in Volume 3.
Yeah. The Volume 3 amazed me, and 4 I would have preferred it if it was a little more concrete and understandable in the beginning, and then they went into the book that he wrote.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been happier with it because I found myself sort of drifting off trying to read, it's like 15 pages of this sort of, it's all
dreamlike or nightmare-like.
That's probably why I find it the most disturbing is because it's got that kind of sensibility of, I think it's actually the most realistic to me in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Because it seems like something some obscure artist would put together and feel this larger voice behind them,
Yeah, and it felt like, and it really did a good job of trying to say, okay, is this person prophetic or are they crazy? And you could see it going either way.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Well, is that it for Volume 4?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like I said, I really enjoy them. I recommend them for people who like the Hellraiser epic comics.
Oh, yeah.
Very informative. If you like poetry and like good artwork and stuff.
Yeah, and stories that are more disturbing in your mind than graphically, I think.
Right.
Yeah. They do extend in some places. They do go a little further beyond than what the comic book stories went or the movies went.
Yeah.
They go to some really extreme places because it's written stuff. So in written stuff, they can always like push the envelope a little further.
Yeah.
And it was for mature audiences. It was epic Marvel, so they could push the envelope, and they really did. And some of these things are really, really. They pretty much push it beyond. They all deserve the name Clive Barker on them because at that time period, that was the type of work that was coming out under his name through the Epic line, and that's all those comic books, the ones they did for the Books of the Blood, Tapping the Vein, and everything. All those have a special place in my life because I was very young at the time when they came out, very impressionable. So I've been affected by Barker, So it was very artistic. I mean, I really missed the time when they came up with these Hellraiser comic books. And nowadays, the thing is, nowadays you can read the comic books from Boom Comics. You read them in like 5 minutes, and you're done, and then the story continues.
You can read it in the car before you like you could just don't start your car and just read it and then drive home.
But I'm always amazed at how fast those comics. I blow through comics like that. It's just like you said, 15 minutes at most.
Yeah. And then the old Hellraiser comics, they had like 4 complete stories in every single one. And even though they were short, sometimes they would still take you enough time to read it. Sometimes the art was completely amazing. They were like painted or airbrushed or hand painted, or the artwork was some amazingly veteran artists. They were written by veteran writers for Marvel and DC. So they were really great. They were really great. I really miss that golden age.
How much do you think the internet and cell phones have to do with taking away our attention from comic book reading or any type of reading, as far as how much attention we spend on stories, and are they changed?
That's a good question. I wonder how many people don't read books anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people, unfortunately. I know that because I used to sell books, and nowadays you can't even give them away. But people would, instead of like 15 years ago or 10 years ago, people would sit down and read a book. Now they sit down and they get their phone out and they play an app.
Yeah.
Or they go on Facebook. And, so there is definitely a change in habits that reflects a change in attention span.
Well, I know that Facebook eats into my time quite a lot. Oh, yeah. And I think about that because, when somebody loans me a book and I'm like, oh, God. Because, I have the books that I read are for this podcast, and that's it now. I don't have time to read anything else.
Yeah, I found myself actively trying to read more, like, getting books from Amazon and stuff like that. And I love bargains, and I used to go to a flea market all the time when I was back in Portugal because I lived really close to a town which had a huge flea market where I got most of my stuff secondhand, like CDs and books. I would get them really cheap, and that was a way that I could get my hands on a lot of stuff without actually having to spend a lot of money. Mm-hmm. When I moved to America, I thought, it's going to be great. I'm going to have comic book stores in every single corner. And I come here, and it's like, no, it's not really like that anymore. And it's like,
right. Yeah, it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you have anything relatively close to you now as far as a good comic store? Or?
Yeah. I mean, I have to drive there, but
right. I have one right next to my work, actually.
Oh, you lucky guy. Yeah.
It's the only comic book store in our whole city, but
I got one
better.
In the Cupertino in the Cupertino Mall, right next to the buildings of the Apple campus. There's a shopping mall, and usually whenever I go to the cinema, then before that I just stop by the comic book store. I subscribe to some of those Clive Barker comics coming out, like Next Testament and Hellraiser.
I'm behind on those now. I just need to get some money, and then I'll go try to get them up.
So it's fun. I mean, it's fun, but it's not like it used to be. I mean, I would get like so many comic books a month, and then I just kind of gave up on it because it was way too much money. In the late '90s, that's the period when I kind of gave up on American comic books.
We should try to get Boom to give us review copies of these things.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, geez, I think that we do enough press for them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that would be great. I mean, hey, we could get like.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say we can get like Mark Miller in here one day because definitely he already said he was interested in being in the podcast and he likes the podcast. So I'm sure we could probably get him here and maybe we can, talk to the guys from Boom Comics.
Yeah. That would be good. I should work on that. I mean, other blogs that review things, they get review copies of things for free all the time.
Well, yeah. I mean, I got a book of Barbie Wilde. She sent a review copy.
And Nicholas Vince sent us the Amazon versions of.
Actually, I bought mine.
Oh, yeah. Was it? Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, I already had bought mine on.
Yeah, but
as soon as it came
Barbie
out.
gave us the.
Review copies.
Yeah, review copies.
Yeah, which was funny because she was in Paris at the time, so she mailed it to Portugal, and then I read it in Paris when I was visiting Paris. I took it with me, so I ended up reading it in Paris while I was there to go to the embassy. But that's just a little thing that happens.
Very cool.
Yeah, but that was from the author herself. I mean, not from the publishing company.
Yeah, well, we'll look into that. So
we have to figure out how to. We need to be more. We need to be more out there.
So guys, remember Ether configuration, Scribe configuration, and those are beautiful. So check them out.
Yeah.
And do you guys have plans for Halloween?
Not yet. I know that my wife and I, we always do like a marathon of different movies. So we're still trying to put our list together. So far, we've got we've watched the last two Omens, the past two Halloweens. So we're doing the Final Conflict this year for sure, and that's about the only one I think we're going to do the Rob Zombie movies too. We've never watched those, and I've been meeting all these people, these conventions from those movies, like Sid Haig. And so, so we're going to have to watch those too, I think.
How do you like the Omen sequels? I've only seen the first one.
Oh my God! You got to see the whole thing.
Yeah, I like them all. I saw all of them.
It didn't really seem like it was meant to have sequels.
Yes and no. If you see number 2, you'll kind of fall, and you'll have to end up. 3 is not, I don't think, is straight up part of the first 2 as much. I don't know. It's not as good, but it's all right. It finished the story for me. So,
which is it that's supposed to be one of the worst movies ever? Oh, I think that's Exorcist 2. Which is one of the worst.
The Heretic.
With the James Earl Jones dressed as a giant grasshopper.
Really? See, I never got that far in that one.
Man.
Okay. Yeah.
The Heretic. Yeah. I remember about that though.
It's a mess. But I always enjoyed very much the Omen Omen movies.
Well,
with Sam Neill, one of my favorite actors.
Fangoria put out a piece on the Final Conflict back in the early 80s, I think. This is when I was really a kid reading Fangoria, but they put out kind of like this false document article about the Antichrist and Damien Thorne and all this. It was really compelling at the time because it was really grody about. I don't even want to get into it, but I might have to look that up again.
I like those late 70s movies that were like paranoia about Satanism.
Oh yeah, it's all over.
Yeah, like all these normal people that are living their normal lives are secretly like a Satanist.
That's all still fallout from the first Exorcist and also Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, Rosemary's Baby for sure.
Yeah,
and there was a really bad. While we're at the topic of that, there was a really bad movie with Peter Cushing and about Dracula, and it's in London, and there's like a bunch of Satanists that create a cult. The head of the cult is Dracula. I forgot. I think it's the Wives of Dracula, or I don't know. It's
by something. I know the one you're speaking of. I actually like that movie a lot. Though it's so 70 cheesy. It reminds me.
I know. And Dracula is speaking behind a desk, and Dr.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Is Dracula's a head of a corporation? So it's just,
he's head of a corporation. Exactly. So you've seen the one I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's cool. I'm trying to come up with some plans for Halloween, and for now I have The Crow to watch and Devil's Night.
Oh yeah, that's right. You found that really cheap on Blu-ray.
Yeah, it's going to be cool. So
I got the Blu-ray when it came out. The problem is, for me, Blu-rays that are at night all the time don't look as good as Blu-rays like HD movies that are in the daytime.
Oh, okay.
So The Crow, you'll see a lot of purple and where it would be black. And...
Oh yeah, so I guess you won't like Dark City as well.
Maybe.
Oh yeah.
It's just from the same director, actually. All right. Well, yeah. I'm maybe I'll get something we'll dress up, because I know that my wife is she already has a few things in mind to dress up
So
for
this will
Halloween.
be your first. This will be your first American Halloween, right? Then.
Yes, that's why I'm
Awesome.
so excited about it.
Awesome.
Yeah. There's going to be a Halloween haunt in the park next to our house, the Great America Park. So we're probably going to go to that Halloween haunt thing, and they're going to have like a labyrinth with zombies. It's going to be made like a high school and stuff.
Wow.
So it's going to be cool. It's going to be
Very
cool.
cool.
All right.
Yeah, welcome to the club then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. So,
Well, we have some comments from Facebook. Bradley Gartz says, "I have not read these, but would be interesting to know, given the time period that they were released, how they tied in with the first two movies. And of course, now I have to go and get these off of eBay. So I would say they're not really tied too much into the movies, except for they expand on the mythology from Hellraiser 2.
Mm-hmm.
yes, that's obviously the one with Leviathan, the Labyrinth, and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and Cenobites that live inside the Labyrinth. That's the only thing that I see as expanding on.
Yeah.
Because it's a completely alternative thing to the bloodline Lamarshan, for example.
Right,
yeah.
right. Yeah, so that it branches off from there the way the comics did.
Which I hated because of these comics. I was when the movie
Yeah.
came out, Bloodline came out. I was expecting Book of the Damned Volume 3 on film, and it wasn't there.
Yeah,
gosh.
I know. Yeah, I mean,
And
so Hellraiser 3 was like a big disappointment then.
Oh yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
like Hellraiser 3 that much when I first saw it. I like it better now. We did that show, so
Yeah.
yeah.
And then David Anderson said in a couple of tweets on Twitter, he said, "I remember reading the Wachowskis of Matrix fame worked on these. Due to some Writers Guild rule, the Books of the Damned and Ecto Kid were only credited to one of them."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Larry.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah, thank you, David. I guess that's it for our comments.
All right. Well, not many people out there, I guess, might have read this. So I kind of understand why they didn't really have a lot of comments.
No, I hadn't read these. I had no idea. I didn't really have a clue what they were about. I figured they were going to be something totally separate from the comics,
Right.
from the Hellraiser comics.
Right. So, like I said, one of the things that I really like about these books is the whole idea of, these books out there, these fake books that exist, like Isidore Klauski's of Hell,
Yeah.
and, Bodeker's Treatise of Alternate Human Anatomy and stuff like that.
Tucker's Encyclopedia.
Yeah,
Serial killers.
I made a fake cover for a Tucker's Encyclopedia of Mass Murderers once, and I think I came up with a little article for Lamarshan. I took a picture of an old book that I had, and I think Eric Gross of the Pandorics came up with an image of Lamarshan, and I came up with a little text blurb, and I photoshopped it onto the empty pages of the book. And I was like, "Hey guys, I found the Tucker's Encyclopedia of Mass Murderers." And it's like. And I think I might still have some of those images around.
And then the Blades of the Boros Uratu looks like a pulp novel. The way they did the cover of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, like I was telling you guys, I want to photocopy that and actually put it on a cover of one of my old novels here, just to use as a prop or something,
Yeah.
That'd be cool. So yeah, really, really cool stuff. If you can find it, get it. It really takes you places that the books and the comics didn't, and it doesn't shy away from being disturbing.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Well, Max, it must be really late for you now.
It's almost 2, but this is kind of the time I haunt anyway. Like I said, I was up till 5 yesterday morning making boxes, so it's the coolest time of the day here, the dog days of summer. So I usually have like a window open to fumigate all the glue fumes and everything I use.
Wow.
So I usually work late into the night, so it's like lunchtime for me about now.
So
all right.
It's kind of too bad that I didn't understand what your boxes were, except for the Hellraiser one, the Lament configuration. When I saw your booth at
Right.
at Monster Mania.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, that's been my introduction. Now, that's been the cool thing is that, it's been great to introduce people to the Books of the Damned and also to the Hellraiser movies, because there's a lot of people that come to the table just because they see shiny things, and they want to know what it's all about. So
well, yours is one of the most interesting booths there, that's for sure. I mean, everybody else had posters and T-shirts.
Wow, thank you very much, man. It's been a long time. Jose's been there from near the beginning with us, as far as watching the gallery expand and everything. So it's been really great to be able to get out there to the conventions and meet new people.
Yeah, it seems like you're really
fantastic.
It seems like you're really picking up on that and going to more and more.
Yeah, I've been trying to. I mean, it costs money. I just got back from a couple conventions and made a little money, but then you end up spending it all over again you have to resupply yourself,
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
All right. Yeah, I mean, it's been fantastic to go there and see those boxes in the. You really excel when you come up with original stuff, and you kind of stir away from the old Hellraiser box, and you move into other boxes. That's when it really excels with all the talented people that come up with amazing work.
Yeah, and it's a sad thing that most of those boxes don't sell as much as like the Lament configuration would, but it's like that's where all the real creativity is behind all this new art and histories and stories and everything. So.
Right, but I think you have to have a way to bring them in.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the Lament configuration does.
Right.
I tell everybody it's the gateway drug. So.
Yeah. All right. Well. Thank you again for being here, and I'm sorry that we took so much time.
No, not at all, man. This has been great. I love it.
Kept you up. All right. Well, thanks again, and all right. I guess everybody's asleep here now. Even the cats are asleep. So I guess
once I leave this room, I'll find out who's asleep.
Yeah. Probably your wife will be sleeping. Your kid will be wide awake.
Well, he's supposed to have gone to bed at 8:30.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, thanks again for this, and it was great talking to you guys. Catch you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
That was Clive Barker Podcast, Episode 52, Books of the Damned. You can reach us on the web at www.clivebarkercast.com. Leave us a review on iTunes and wherever other places you can review us. We're on all kinds of other places where podcasts are aggregated. Like our page on Facebook, join the Occupy Midian group. On Twitter, we're at BarkerCast and at Occupy Midian. On the forum, we're at www.clivebarkerfans.com/forum. Theme was by Colin Lakativa. And once again, there's still plenty of time as we're recording this to put the to do the raffle to help out with the bandwidth. And you could win an autographed Great in Secret Show hardcover, autographed by Clive Barker. So September 8th is the drawing when we're going to see who wins that. So, and there's a hint that there might be a second prize. I'm still working the details out on that. So get those tickets in. I really appreciate it. It's helping to keep the site going. And all right, well, thanks. We'll talk to you next time. Our next one we're looking at is the novel Cabal, and we're looking forward to this. We've spent so much time on Nightbreed: The Cabal Cut that it'll be good to revisit that novel. Okay, have a good evening or day or night or morning.